Human sexuality is one of the most fascinating parts of who we are, a force that drives, connects, and sometimes confuses us. It's not just about biology or reproduction, it's about emotion, identity, attraction, and the mysterious chemistry that pulls two people together. In this exploration, we'll peel back the layers of desire from our most primal instincts to the deeper emotional bonds that shape intimacy. I'm Dr. Justin Lehmiller, and together we're going to uncover how the human mind and body collaborate in the art of connection, revealing that sex at its core is far more psychological than physical. When we talk about human sexuality, most people imagine it as something that happens below the waist, a purely physical act driven by instinct, attraction, or chemistry. But the truth is, what happens between the ears is far more powerful than what happens between the sheets. Our sexuality is not a single impulse, it's a dialogue, a conversation between the brain, the body, and the emotions. It's evolution whispering to us through sensation and thought, while experience and culture shape how we interpret that whisper. Think about it, desire isn't something we choose, yet it's also not entirely automatic. It's born in the oldest parts of the brain, the ones responsible for survival, hunger, thirst, reproduction, but it's refined and reinterpreted by the newest ones, the ones capable of love, imagination, and fantasy. This delicate balance between the primitive and the profound is what makes human sexuality so endlessly fascinating. We're wired for pleasure, but we also crave meaning. And that's where the psychology of sex begins to unfold. In a way, every sexual thought, fantasy, or attraction is the brain's way of communicating something deeper. The amygdala, that tiny almond-shaped structure buried deep inside the brain, lights up when we feel arousal. It's part of our emotional processing center, linking desire with excitement and even fear. Meanwhile, the hypothalamus releases hormones that set the body into motion, increasing heart rate, stimulating blood flow, heightening sensitivity. But here's the twist: while these mechanisms are ancient, the meaning we assign to them is uniquely human. Take the simple act of attraction. When we find someone appealing, it's not just about looks or scent, it's about the story our brain builds around them. Two people can experience the same physical attraction, but the psychological interpretation makes it personal. For some, it's the thrill of novelty. For others, it's the comfort of familiarity. And research shows that even our preferences, what we find sexy, what turns us on, are shaped as much by experience and context as by biology. The brain doesn't just react, it learns, it conditions, it fantasizes. That's why the same touch, the same kiss can feel wildly different depending on who it's with and what it means. Our neurons don't fire in isolation. They fire with emotion, with narrative. When oxytocin and dopamine flow together, something magical happens. Pleasure merges with bonding, arousal merges with affection. It's not just sex, it's connection. But if our sexuality is a dialogue between the brain, body, and emotions, then the question becomes who's leading the conversation. Sometimes it's biology, the surge of hormones, the instinct to seek pleasure and reproduction. Other times it's psychology, the yearning for validation, the desire for closeness, the need to be seen and understood. And often it's both at once, tangled together so tightly that we can't tell where instinct ends and intimacy begins. Let's look at one of the most powerful examples of this interplay: fantasy. Sexual fantasies aren't random thoughts that pop into our heads. They're psychological playgrounds where the brain explores emotion, power, and identity. People often think fantasies reveal hidden desires, but in reality, they reveal needs: the need to feel desired, to feel in control, to feel free, to escape judgment. The body may respond to the fantasy, but it's the brain that scripts it, directs it, and gives it meaning. Studies show that about 95% of people have recurring sexual fantasies, and these fantasies often say less about what we want to do and more about what we want to feel. For instance, fantasies about dominance or submission aren't necessarily about control. They can be about trust, surrender, safety, or release. They're emotional stories told through erotic imagery. This is the psychology of desire, the way our minds weave instinct and emotion into something deeply personal. And here's where the human mind sets us apart from other species. Animals mate, humans make love. For us, sex is symbolic. It represents belonging, approval, identity, even rebellion. In one study, participants who reported feeling emotionally connected to their partners experienced greater satisfaction and longer lasting desire. It's proof that the brain's emotional centers, not just the physical ones, determine how deeply we experience pleasure. But this doesn't mean that our instincts are irrelevant. In fact, they're the foundation of everything. The same evolutionary mechanisms that once ensured our survival still influence who we're drawn to and why. For example, research shows that we subconsciously pick up on cues of fertility, health, and genetic compatibility, from facial symmetry to scent. Men's testosterone levels can even spike when they detect ovulatory cues in women. Even if they're completely unaware of it, it's biology's subtle nudge reminding us of our primal wiring. And yet, We've evolved beyond the simplicity of instinct. We seek partners not just for reproduction, but for resonance, someone who makes us feel safe, seen, and desired. This is where the brain's reward system takes over. When we fall for someone, dopamine floods our neural pathways, giving us that intoxicating high we call infatuation. The same regions that activate during addiction light up during early stage love. It's as if the brain says, this person is your reward, don't let them go. But over time, that spark evolves. What begins as raw passion often transforms into something quieter, deeper, the kind of intimacy that doesn't depend on novelty, but on understanding. Neuroscience shows that couples in long term relationships can maintain sexual satisfaction not by chasing excitement, but by cultivating emotional closeness. When trust and vulnerability enter the equation, desire becomes sustainable. And that's something most people misunderstand. They think long term desire fades because of time, but more often it fades because the emotional dialogue goes silent. We stop being curious about each other. We stop exploring the psychological side of sex. Yet, when we bring that curiosity back, when we learn to communicate, to listen, to touch not just for pleasure, but for meaning, the brain reawakens. Desire becomes a living thing again.
Mm.
This is why communication is such a powerful aphrodisiac. When couples talk openly about their fantasies, their boundaries, their needs, they activate something profound safety. And safety is the foundation upon which true pleasure is built. In a safe space, the brain's fear centers, the amygdala's alarm system quiet down, allowing the body to fully experience arousal. Pleasure thrives where fear subsides. There's a paradox here that's beautifully human. We crave both security and novelty. The brain loves stability, but it also hungers for surprise. And so, successful relationships often find ways to blend the two, keeping emotional trust steady while introducing new elements of excitement. Sometimes it's as simple as changing context, a different setting, a new touch, a shared fantasy. These subtle changes reignite the brain's reward system, reminding it of the thrill of discovery. Desire then isn't a fixed trait, it's a living dialogue. It ebbs and flows with stress, mood, hormones, and connection. It's influenced by sleep, diet, mental health, even self image. When we feel confident and emotionally nourished, our sexual self comes alive. When we feel unseen or disconnected, that same energy retreats. The brain's reward circuits respond to attention, both the kind we give and the kind we receive. Here's something fascinating. Studies show that people who regularly engage in affectionate touch, hugs, kisses, skin contact, experience lower stress and stronger immune responses. Touch literally changes the body's chemistry. It increases oxytocin, lowers cortisol, and builds trust. That's why intimacy is more than a prelude to sex. It's a biological bonding mechanism. We're wired to connect through touch, and our brains reward us for it. But connection goes beyond the physical. Our sexual psychology is shaped by memory, by meaning. A scent, a song, even a glance can trigger arousal because it connects to emotional memory. The hippocampus, the brain's memory center, works closely with the limbic system, linking past experiences to present sensations. That's why desire can feel nostalgic, why certain moments of passion can transport us back to who we were when we first felt alive. Sex, in that sense, is a time machine of emotion. It takes us through our histories, our insecurities, our longings. It reminds us of our need to be wanted, to be chosen. It exposes not just our bodies, but our stories. And when two people share that vulnerability, something extraordinary happens. Intimacy transforms from a biological act into an emotional language. What makes human sexuality so powerful is that it's never just about pleasure. It's about meaning. The same act that brings physical release can also bring healing, comfort, connection, or revelation. In therapy, I've seen couples rediscover each other not by adding new techniques, but by reawakening old emotions, remembering why they wanted each other in the first place. And that brings us back to the idea that sexuality is a dialogue between the brain, body, and emotions. When that dialogue is open and curious, sex becomes more than a habit, it becomes an expression of self. But when it's silenced, when shame, fear, or misunderstanding take over, that dialogue turns into static. The key is to keep listening to ourselves, to our partners, to what our bodies and minds are trying to say. Because the truth is, we don't just have sex to reproduce or to relieve tension. We do it to feel alive, to affirm our worth, to share something wordless but profound. Our sexuality is our most human language, one that speaks in sensation, in touch, in emotion. So the next time you think about desire, remember that it's not just a spark from the body, it's a story written by the mind. Every heartbeat, every breath, every craving carries within it a message, a reminder that our sexuality is not a single note, but a symphony, one that plays between instinct and intimacy, between biology and psychology, between the body and the soul. And perhaps that's the most beautiful truth of all, that our sexuality is not something we control or conquer. It's something we understand, nurture, and share. It's the deepest conversation we'll ever have, the one that connects us not just to each other, to what it truly means to be human. When we think of intimacy, most people imagine it beginning with attraction, a look, a spark, a touch. But real intimacy, the kind that lingers long after the lights go out, doesn't begin with instinct. It begins where instinct ends. It starts when physical attraction evolves into emotional understanding, vulnerability, and connection. I'm Dr. Justin Lehmiller, and today we're going to explore the psychology behind that mysterious shift, the transformation of desire into intimacy, and what it truly means to be close to another human being. At its core, sex is an instinct. Every living organism is driven to reproduce, to seek pleasure, to continue its species. But for humans, it's never just that simple. We've taken a biological impulse and turned it into poetry, art, and obsession. Our brains are wired not only to crave the physical act, but to seek the emotional meaning behind it. We don't just want sex, we want to be wanted. We want to feel seen, accepted, understood. That's the line where instinct fades and intimacy begins. The human brain is uniquely built for this. In the first moments of attraction, it's the limbic system that takes control, the region responsible for emotion, reward, and survival. It floods us with dopamine, the feel good chemical that makes our hearts race and our palms sweat. This is nature's way of getting our attention. But as attraction deepens, another part of the brain comes online, the prefrontal cortex, the center of empathy, moral reasoning, and emotional regulation. That's when the raw impulse of lust starts to merge with the deeper need for connection. We move from wanting a body to wanting a bond. That transition is fascinating because it reveals how layered human sexuality truly is. Desire alone can be intoxicating, but it's fleeting. Intimacy, on the other hand, requires exposure, not of skin, but of self. It's about showing someone who you are beneath your instincts, beneath your defenses. And here's the paradox, the very thing we crave most, emotional closeness, is also the thing that scares us the most. Our brains are wired to seek connection, but they're also wired to protect us from pain. When two people start to fall in love, the brain releases oxytocin and vasopressin, the bonding hormones that create trust and attachment. This is the same chemistry that bonds mothers to their newborns and that keeps partners connected in long-term relationships. In those early stages, sex can feel almost transcendent because biologically the brain interprets physical intimacy as emotional security. Every touch becomes a message, you're safe here. But as time passes, maintaining that intimacy requires something biology alone can't provide. It requires choice, effort, and vulnerability. In many ways, our sexual instincts are like fire. They ignite quickly, burn bright, but fade fast. Intimacy is like tending that fire over time, learning not just how to spark it, but how to sustain it. And the psychology behind this is remarkable. Studies have shown that couples who engage in open, emotionally honest communication report not just greater relationship satisfaction, but also higher levels of sexual satisfaction. It's proof that the mind and the body are in constant conversation. When we feel emotionally safe, our desire expands. When we feel misunderstood, it shuts down. Think of it like this: the brain's pleasure system is closely linked to its emotional circuitry. The same regions that process love, trust, and empathy also govern arousal and orgasm. That means when we feel connected, our brains actually experience sex differently. Physical pleasure amplifies emotional pleasure and vice versa. But when trust is broken through lies, neglect, or emotional distance, those same neural circuits dim. The body may still respond, but the experience feels hollow, mechanical, incomplete. That's why intimacy isn't something that happens automatically after sex. It's something we build before, during, and after it. Every shared secret, every touch, every laugh strengthens the invisible threads between two minds. Neuroscientists call this interpersonal synchrony the way two people's brains literally begin to mirror each other during moments of deep connection. Their heart rates align. Their breathing synchronizes. Even their brainwave patterns begin to match. In those moments, it's not just emotional, it's physiological. The body and brain merge into something shared. But it's not always easy to get there. Our modern culture has turned sex into performance, something to achieve, to compare, to perfect. We talk about technique, endurance, appearance. And in that noise, we often lose sight of the emotional core. True intimacy doesn't depend on how we look or how long we last. It depends on how safe and accepted we feel. Because when we feel emotionally naked, the body follows. In psychology, there's a concept called sexual authenticity. It's the idea that the best sex happens when we're fully present, when we can express desire without fear, when we can be both vulnerable and confident. But that level of authenticity only happens in emotionally intimate environments. When we feel judged, our brains go into defense mode. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes active, releasing stress hormones that shut down arousal. It's biology's way of saying, now's not the time. The body literally won't open up when the mind feels unsafe. That's why intimacy is the most erotic thing we can experience. It allows us to turn off self-consciousness and turn on connection. It's the quiet knowing that we can be fully ourselves and still be wanted. That safety, psychological and emotional, is the ultimate aphrodisiac. In one study, couples who reported feeling emotionally safe during intimacy experienced stronger orgasms and longer afterglow effects, meaning the bonding feelings lasted hours longer. The brain remembers not just the act, but the emotion attached to it. What's even more fascinating is that intimacy doesn't always begin in the bedroom. Sometimes it starts with eye contact, with a conversation, with laughter. These moments create microbonds, small but powerful cues that tell the brain, this person understands me. Even subtle gestures like mirroring someone's body language or finishing each other's sentences release oxytocin. The chemistry of trust starts long before physical touch. That's why, for many, emotional connection can be the strongest form of foreplay. And yet, we often underestimate the power of emotional vulnerability. We live in a world that celebrates independence and strength, but intimacy thrives in openness. To be intimate means to let someone see the parts of you that aren't polished, the fears, the insecurities, the desires that live beneath the surface. It's terrifying, but it's also liberating, because once you're truly seen, you no longer have to perform, you can just be. And that authenticity is deeply erotic. It's also worth noting that the psychology of intimacy isn't just about romance. It's about connection in all its forms. Close friendships, familial bonds, even moments of empathy between strangers all activate the same neural pathways that underlie sexual intimacy. Our brains crave closeness as much as they crave oxygen. And when that need goes unmet, we feel it not just emotionally, but physically. Loneliness can raise stress hormones, lower immune function, and even dull our capacity for pleasure. Intimacy, in every sense, keeps us healthy, body and mind. Let's return to romantic intimacy for a moment. There's an interesting phenomenon that happens in long term relationships. In the beginning, everything feels electric. Every touch is new. Every kiss feels charged. That's the power of novelty. It triggers dopamine, giving us that addictive rush of new love. But as time passes, the novelty fades. The brain adapts, the dopamine spikes flatten. Many couples interpret this as the end of passion. But what's really happening is a transition from dopamine driven desire to oxytocin driven attachment. The love deepens, but in a quieter, steadier way. The challenge is that many people miss the thrill of that early stage, the butterflies, the anticipation. But here's the secret: you can reignite that feeling by intentionally reintroducing novelty and curiosity. Trying something new together, whether it's a conversation, an activity, or a sexual experience, jolts the brain's reward system back to life. But it only works when it's built on emotional safety. Novelty without trust feels risky. Novelty with trust feels exhilarating. And that's what makes intimacy so unique. It thrives on a delicate balance between comfort and excitement, between knowing and mystery. Too much comfort and we get complacent, too much mystery and we feel insecure. The couples who sustain deep desire over decades are the ones who keep rediscovering each other, who stay curious, who keep asking, who are you today? Because the truth is, we're always changing, and real intimacy grows not from knowing everything about someone, but from continually choosing to learn. From a psychological perspective, intimacy is also a mirror. Through it, we see ourselves reflected in another person's eyes. The way someone touches us, listens to us, desires us, it teaches us how to see our own worth. That's why rejection can hurt so deeply. It's not just the loss of another person, but the loss of the version of ourselves we saw through them. And yet, even in that pain, intimacy serves its purpose. It teaches us that connection is not about possession, but about recognition, about being known, if only for a moment, by another mind. Here's something beautiful in fMRI studies. When people gaze into the eyes of someone they love, the same brain regions light up as when they experience a profound sense of spirituality. In other words, love and intimacy activate the same circuits as awe and transcendence. That might explain why being truly close to someone can feel almost sacred. It's not just about the physical bond, it's about the merging of identities, the blurring of boundaries between me. And yet, despite all this, we often treat intimacy as something that just happens, something we fall into, rather than something we build. But real intimacy is intentional. It's a practice. It's the willingness to listen, to understand, to show up even when it's uncomfortable. It's choosing vulnerability over control, connection over ego. And in that choice, something extraordinary happens, desire deepens. Because the closer we get to someone emotionally, the more space we create for sexual freedom. The mind relaxes, the body follows, and instinct transforms into something human, something profound. So perhaps the real secret to lasting desire isn't casing passion, but cultivating closeness. Because when the body and mind trust each other, pleasure becomes limitless. Every touch becomes more than a sensation. It becomes a message, a dialogue, a promise. At the end of the day, sex may begin as instinct, but intimacy, true intimacy, is a choice. It's the decision to stay open, to stay curious, to keep exploring the space between two hearts. And when we make that choice, tap into something far deeper than physical pleasure. We discover the psychology of connection itself, the place where the body, the brain, and the soul finally speak the same language. That's where human sexuality becomes its most beautiful, not in the act, but in the understanding. Because when two people meet beyond instinct, beyond fear, beyond performance, they discover what it really means to be human, to be seen, to be accepted, and to be loved